Welcome to the show, everyone. If you are finding this on YouTube, hi, I'm JJ Flazanes. This is my show. Today, we're going to have a great conversation with Jeremy, and I can't wait to share. We've known each other for a long time. We probably started podcasting around the same time. Maybe we'll figure that out in a second. But if you are coming on today's show because you found us on YouTube, just know that means because it's my show, I'm not really a host. I'm going to talk. So if you don't like me and you are searching Jeremy and you want more of just him because you don't like me, totally cool. Jeremy, where can they find more of just you?
JeremyRyanSlate.com, or I'm Jeremy Ryan Slate on all platforms. Not because I'm like a weird person with three names, but because my parents actually named me after somebody. So I had to start using my middle name to get found.
Well, there you go. So go to JeremyRyanSlate.com to have more of just Jeremy. If we're not good, and that's cool. Happy New Year, everybody. It is about that time. On my end, it's 11:11. Perfect time to start this podcast. And if you are listening on the podcast, obviously know by now we're also on video. So you can come on over to jjflazanes.tv to meet Jeremy. Jeremy, it's been a long time. 2018, maybe, then we saw each other?
Somewhere around. I think San Diego was probably the last time we saw each other in the flesh. So it's great to kind of reconnect and hang out as we're kind of diving into a new year too, 2023 coming up soon.
Yeah. And I thought this was a perfect topic, the passive observer to the creator of your own life. And, we're both podcasters, so we have audiences, people that follow us or listen, and a lot of you we don't know. And not that I'm calling you a passive observer, so please don't take offense to that. It's just in case you would classify yourself as a passive observer, but maybe it's time to break out of that mold and become the creator of your own life in a more conscious, focused, intentional way. I thought this was a great topic for the end of the year. So first, let's start with your journey, how you got into podcasting. When did you start?
2014, the first time around. It was absolutely terrible. And I quit after about 90 days and started my current show in November 20th of 2015. So we just passed, I think, the 7-year mark or something like that. So been doing this for a long time. I started it literally because I failed at everything else I've ever done in my life. So I'm like, hey, what can be the worst thing? Let's start a podcast. We saw 10,000 listens in our first month, and a lot of great things started happening for me. And that's led me to starting a PR agency and everything since then.
So let's talk about, I'm just curious because I started in 2014 also, the first iteration of Fit to Love. Didn't really have a coach or have any help. I did hire somebody to help me, but she wasn't a podcaster. Do you ever go back and go, I hired that person because they had like a Twitter following, but I hired them to do podcasting. And then I wondered why that didn't match. It's very obvious now, but I'm like, but I also knew her personally. So I thought, well, I'd rather invest in someone that I know, like, and trust, even though it wasn't a match. So I launched Fit to Love in 2014, 6 days a week, and did 350 episodes, 18 months, and decided that something needed to be moved and fixed. And somewhere in the middle of there, I kind of relaunched because I didn't know there was video podcasts and audio podcasts. So I was putting it all in the same channel. Hello. Anyway, I'm the person who just goes. I have an idea, I just go. And then I learn later. I'm not going to go research. If I have like the fire in me, I just want to attend to that. Plus I had so much content. So when you started your show, like you said, everything you had done before had kind of failed. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a weird experience. So I'm a way too much of a student. So my undergrad degree, I'm a double major in Catholic theology and Torah, two things that apparently don't complement each other, but hey, what the heck, why not? And then I got my master's degree in early Roman Empire propaganda. I studied the tools that the Roman emperor, the first one being Augustus, used to convince people he was God. So I actually wrote a 100-page thesis about that. Yes, I'm way too obsessed with Roman history. And my goal was to be a college professor. I applied to one program, which was NYU. Ended up not getting into that program. And this was around 2011. I come out and I'm like, all right, so what do you do for a living when you're overqualified for every job you want, but underqualified for every job you want, so no one will hire you? So what I ended up actually doing is during the day, I was working with a house painter, and this was like old school. So you were doing everything by hand, getting up at, starting work at 6:30 in the morning, working until 5 in the afternoon, doing that. I'd come home and I'd eat, and then I'd work at the gym at night as the nighttime manager. So I'm doing that. And then I'm also doing my workouts like 11 o'clock at night. So that was really what I was doing from 2011 to 2012, just kind of figuring things out. I ended up teaching at a private school because you don't really need any like certifications or anything like that. They just kind of throw you in a room with 40 kids and say good luck. So I ended up teaching history at a private school. I barely survived. And in 2012, my mom ended up having a really, really bad stroke. And it really kind of sent my world for a topspin, trying to figure out like what I was going to do with my life. At that point in time, my fiance, who's now my wife, was presented with a network marketing opportunity. I didn't know what that was. So I thought I was going to be like a multi billionaire in like 3 days. And it didn't happen. I did upset a lot of friends, but it was kind of the first thing to like get me started. So I went from there to selling life insurance. I sold products on Amazon. I did a lot of different things to try and figure it out. And then I actually ended up working at a friend's marketing firm. I had taught myself how to build websites. And the podcast was really just a hobby. I started alongside that to feel like I was doing something with my life.
What was the first title of the very first podcast that you did that you aren't doing now?
So first of all, I always tell everybody out there, research what you're going to do and make sure nobody else has the name. So I started out and called it Rock Your Life. Turned out I got a cease and desist from somebody else that actually already had the name. I'm surprised they found me because I was small as anything. So then it became Rock Your Life. I dropped the Y and the O. It just became a U and an R, which means it looks like I really can't spell. So that was the first version. It's actually still out there on Google, and it's pretty embarrassing if you see it.
And how long did you do that before you changed it?
Believe it or not, I got like 40 episodes in. And but it was kind of this thing of like, all right, I'm gonna record a solo episode, and I'm a life coach, which I'm the furthest thing from. I'm like kind of I totally lack empathy. So like I was trying to do these like it's bad. Like my wife tells me, man, you really don't put up with people's, SHIT. So like I'm trying to like be this like life coachy person, which I'm not at all. Like I was just trying to like get into internet marketing. And I would record these episodes the night before. Nobody was listening to them. So I just burned out pretty quickly, but I got like 40 episodes in, which I think we were publishing like 3 a week. So that's a bunch of weeks of actually doing it. To like 100 downloads for the whole thing.
So what was the the story from, okay, this didn't work, I got a cease and desist, and now I'm going to start another one?
So I think a big part of it was so this was 2014. 2015 I ended up getting married. I got married in September that year, and I go to my wife like, man, I was a horrible investment. Like, I don't know, why you invested in me to marry me at that point in time. Because I had like failed all these different things. I was kind of unemployed, but I was sort of employed working for this friend. And I had this podcast I'd given up on. I did this exchange program in May of 2015 with Rotary International, where you actually go and live in another country for a couple months and see how they work and experience their like lifestyle and stuff like that. And believe it or not, that gave me a lot of appreciation for what I do have. I lived in Peru for a bit, and I was like, man, I'm complaining about like how hard I've got it. I literally just watched people rip down a city in a mining strike. Like, I've got it pretty easy. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the right way. So I went out and found a couple different courses, took a look at how I was going to do it the right way. And it was in November of that year that I finally launched the show. But I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it as a professional. I'm never going to miss an episode. And to this day, we still have not missed an episode. And really that viewpoint, I think, was the big difference.
And what was inspiration for the title and the focus this time versus the last time?
Well, first time I just really didn't know. So I just kind of like tried to come up with something. The second time, like, there really was a thought process behind it. I had a conversation with my dad in 2012. This was not long after I quit my teaching job. And he goes, hey, you can't just do what you want to do all your life. You got to find a job. You got to stay there. You got to, one day when you're 65, you can kind of do what you want to do for a few years before you die. I'm like, wow, that's terrible. So I remember saying to my dad, like, Dad, I want to create my own life. And like, that was where the title came from, because I was like, I want to do something. I don't want life to just happen to me. And that's kind of inspired a lot of what I've done. And, the writing I've done, the episodes I've done is, life it's an active process if you choose it to be. If you choose it to be a passive process, you're going to be complaining about a lot of things happening to you in your life.
So the passive observer, was that ever you, or are we talking to other people?
That was definitely me. Like, you know what I mean? I let life happen to me for a really long time. And I think my mom getting sick, that really kind of jarred me out of it, which is weird, by the way, because at 19, I had knee surgery, and I had this like weird out of body near death experience when they couldn't get me breathing again. And it didn't change my life, but it was when it was actually like somebody outside of myself, it really made me look at life a lot differently. And I kind of had realized I'd been living what everybody else wanted me to do. I was kind of following along this path of what everybody else wanted from me, rather than figuring out like, what am I going to do? And when am I going to stop complaining about my own situation?
Yeah. Okay. So divine timing. I was just sharing this post. When I started my show, I record a lot of solo shows, which I still do, but I wanted certain concepts, certain ideas to get out into the world. And I'm now finding I'm wanting to pull some of those earlier episodes back into the present because I have a whole new audience. I have several different channels. I now have a network. And I just want to speak to, and I want to tell everybody, because I was going to bring this forward, but you just said it perfectly. It's a book by Bronnie Ware called the 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I did a whole episode on it again, back in like 2014, 2015. And I just want to quickly list what those 5 regrets of the dying are. And I've been posting this on my Instagram also for anybody that wants to take the image and maybe pin it somewhere so that you can remember. But the first one is, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And that becomes, parental and lineage wise of what people expect of you. And that's sort of outside of yourself, but it's following in that footstep of this expectation that you think you're living up to. But most of us and most people don't question it. They just do it because they think they should or they have to, but they never ask themselves, would anybody, like, why am I doing this? Is it for other people's approval, or am I prostituting myself for love and attention? Is it because I think I'll be banned from the family if I don't? And no one really dives into, why are you making these choices? So again, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Number 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. What I find funny about people that Doug's son, I love him. He's awesome, Adam, and he is not an entrepreneur. And he's probably the highest paid graphic designer I know, which good for him. Keep working for somebody else. But most people with an artistic background usually end up becoming entrepreneurs, and they don't really have that left brain part, or that linear strategic part necessarily all the time, the business part. They have the right brain, artistic, creative, expressive part, but sometimes they don't have that balance, or they don't want to know how to market it or how to sell it. But he make a comment of, he didn't want to be in the grind, and the grind was like working for yourself. And I thought, well, okay, but if you're going to work really hard for someone, why not work for yourself? Because you get all the benefits, you get all the money. Yes, it isn't easy. It is a path. Not everybody should be an entrepreneur. But if you consider yourself a really hard worker, why not work for yourself? Or why not decide that, especially if it's something that you hate? Number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Number 4, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And number 5, I wish I had let myself be happier. The reason why I want to share that now, and the reason why I think it's perfect timing, is because you said, when your dad said, just get a job, because I've seen that too. People in like our parents' generation were like, get a job, a good paying job. Doesn't matter if you hate it or not. Forget if you're selling your soul. Forget it if you, right. And then, but what happens in that time frame when you do that? You usually have health issues. You have relationship issues because you're not happy. And you decide to go work for somebody else, waiting to retire so that you can finally live your life. And guys, tomorrow's not guaranteed. And your mother's stroke was your wake up call for that, right? Not your surgery, but hers. And so I don't care what it is, but we usually need contrast to kind of catapult us into a wake up call. And unfortunately, just talking about it isn't going to do it. It has to be something scary most of the time. But as long as these seeds get planted in your brain, I think that, you can get out ahead of it. You can decide to, hey, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I remember family saying to me, oh, high school was the best time of my life. I thought, well, that is the most depressing thing I've ever heard. If nothing ever gets better after there, kill yourself now and be done with it. I don't mean that seriously. It's a joke.
I hated high school. So if high school was the best time of my life, I was in trouble.
Oh, right. Well, I didn't hate it, but I mean, if as an adult, you're telling children that was the best time of your life and like good luck, like that's pretty sad. Oh, yeah. The rest of your life isn't going to get any better. I'm at the best point of my life ever. I'm sure you are too. So if you are a passive observer, and of course now you're the creator of your own life and you teach others how to do that, what are some of the things that you think people need to hear? Obviously, the contrast helps to kick our butts into gear, but what other things do you think people need to hear to move them from passive observer into creator of their own life?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and frankly, like, when I wrote about this, the entire book was going to be about this, and it ended up, I'm like, wow, there's a lot more to life than just this. But the idea of adversity and how we approach it, like when really difficult things happen to us, there's a few different ways people approach it. There's the first person that says, oh, that looks really hard. I'm going to go sit on the couch and wait till it passes me, which it usually doesn't, by the way. It usually confronts you at some point in time. The other person says, okay, that looks really hard, but what's on the other side of it? How much better am I going to be by going through it? And like, okay, let's hold our breath for a second, but we're going to do this. And I'm sure there's other ways to approach it, but I really just see kind of the two main ways people approach it. So to me, when you're somebody that's really trying to be, extraordinary, or to be, kind of this creator of your own life, the biggest thing is looking at each adversity and saying, okay, what am I going to be better at after the situation? How can I use this to my advantage? What can I get out of this? What can happen from this? And kind of look at it that way. I think if you can really take that from an experience, you can get a lot of it. Like, I think here's a great example. I like to call it, do you follow football at all or no?
I used to, because it was part of the environment I was in, but
Okay, so I like to call it the Mo Lewis moment. Mo Lewis, Jets linebacker, hits Drew Bledsoe in 2001. And Drew Bledsoe, I think, plays one more game for the Patriots in his career, and that's the end of it. Because a guy named Tom Brady comes and takes his spot. Tom Brady would watch more film than everybody else. He'd work out harder than everybody else. And, he was slow. He didn't have a strong arm. He didn't have any of these special abilities, but he would outwork anybody. So then when that adversity came or that opportunity came, he was able to seize that. And it wasn't something that was able to pass him up, because you don't know when that opportunity is coming. You don't know when it's going to happen for you, but you need to be ready. For some people, it's later in life. For others, it's earlier in life. Some people are going to get one chance. Other people are going to get multiple chances, but you need to be ready for when that happens and become the person you need to be to actually get that opportunity. So I think, I think the greatest quarterback in history is probably a great example of how to get through that, right? Like, he watched more film. He worked out harder. He would take wide receivers to his home to practice with them. So what can you do to be better, so when that opportunity comes up, you can take full advantage of it?
great. That's great advice. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't know who Tom Brady is, even if you don't watch football. So, and I would think that actually some people would think he was a natural. And so I don't think a lot of us know that he did all this extra work to get prepared. And I agree with you.
Well, because if you look at him, like, so he's a guy, so he went to this Juniper Serra High School in California, only started because somebody else got hurt. He gets to college at the University of Michigan. The head coach that recruited him left. So for 3 years, he sits on the bench. His senior year, he finally gets to start. But then there's this great prospect called Drew Henson that ends up playing for the Yankees later on. And half the year, the coach Lloyd Carr starts Tom Brady. The other half, he starts Drew Henson. The guy's had to fight for every single thing he's had in front of him, and because he's a better person because of that.
I am sure part of that was his decision that he wanted it, and he wanted it badly enough. He wanted it enough because I believe in divine timing, and also I teach quantum physics and law of attraction. So there's this: if you see it, if you believe it, then it will be, versus if you're waiting for someone else to hand it to you, or you're waiting for it to be outside of you. Like, you can't manifest what you want. You manifest what you are. So when you make yourself more, when you expand into the next version of yourself, when you clean up some of the things that get in your way, and you can actually feel yourself becoming, I don't want to say a better person, because that's not a judgment against other people but a better version of yourself. I'm sure everyone could agree that we all have upper limits. We all have fears. We have patterns, and those patterns stop us from, we sabotage ourselves in different ways, whatever they are for you. If you don't clean that up, and by clean it up, nothing's wrong with you. You're not broken, but your life has created circumstances where you've learned patterns and behaviors, and for the moment they served you, but maybe now they don't serve you any longer. If that doesn't get cleaned up, then you continue to manifest and attract exactly the same thing over and over again. And we have to sort of grow into what we want to be and see it and believe it in order for it to come to us. And the fun thing is, especially with quantum physics and law of attraction, is it's really not even about the doing as much as about the feeling. And so I can see that, if Tom Brady decided this is where I'm going. I mean, I did that when I was in high school. I remember saying, and I've done it everywhere. Actually, let me go past high school. T. Harv Eker.
Yeah.
So Peak Potentials back in the day, must have been 2004 is my first time I went to Millionaire Mind. I did it several times. When he had his first Train the Trainer event from stage, he sold without anyone knowing about it. He pre-sold the very first extreme health event. And I said, I'm going to speak on that stage. And I did. But there was no indicator or reason why I would have gotten that opportunity. I don't even know if my book was out by then. because I have 3 books out now, but I don't even think I had a published book that back then. And I was volunteering at that speaking event. I just decided that I'm going to speak on stage at that event. That's exactly what happened. Just like when I was in high school, I'm like, I'm getting that role. I'm going to be Peter Pan. I don't care if you think I should cut my hair. But I went in with the intention, and I'm not even going to say mindset because I really hate the word mindset. And one day I'll do a whole deep dive on the word mindset, but it's the intention.
Intention is cause, right? Like if you look at it, intention has to come, you have intention, you have the thought, and then you have something happening. So in order to actually do something or have something occur, there has to be that intention, right? If you don't have the intention to do something, it's not going to happen. Yeah,
it focuses you. And it's intention along with belief that you can do it, belief that, and I know for some people, they think, I've been talking about confidence this year. Also, Alison and I are doing a confidence course next year. And, one of the things about confidence is like, you don't just do like 1 or 2 things and all of a sudden, oh, I'm confident. Like that's not how it works. It's getting through, like you said, adversity. It's challenging yourself with an intention to do something. And then it's accomplishing it and being proud of yourself and knowing that it came from within you, not necessarily from outside of you. No one handed it to you. You created it and you believed it and you dedicated yourself to it. And it doesn't even have to be super hard work. It could just be intention and belief coupled with allowing it in, and boom, you can start to show yourself that you're more powerful than you give yourself credit. So with this idea of creating your own life, I know you've done.
Well, can I add something to that real quick before
Absolutely.
we move on? Because I think that's important. Like I'm a big believer in confidence actually comes from competence, right? The better you get at something, the more competent you get at something, the better you can do something, you're going to find you're confident. If you want to be confident before you have those things, like, well, good luck. Confidence comes from ability and creating ability. It doesn't mean you have to be special. You have to have any gifts, but people always ask me, I was a competitive powerlifter in my 20s and I've pulled an 80,000 pound army tank. I've benched 450 pounds. I'm a little guy. I'm 5'7". People are always like, well, how do you do that? 5 pounds a week for 10 years. That's how. So if you can build competence at something, that's where confidence comes from.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I would have said until you do something, you're not, it's like almost like fear. People think they have to get over a fear before they can do something. And I'm like, the only way you're getting over the fear is to go through the fear and do it anyway, so that you can show yourself that you can do it. And then that's when the fear can dissipate. You're never going to feel confident about something you've never done before, ever, because you haven't done it. You don't have the wiring for it. You don't have the experience of it yet, but you can feel confident that even if it's scary, which it should be, because I don't mean to should people, but literally there's nothing wrong with fear. It's whether it stops you or not that becomes a problem. If you let your fear stop you, then your fear controls you. And if you use your fear as leverage, I like to tell people when talking about sort of upper limits, fear or worry and excitement are the same bodily sensation. The difference is the story that you're telling yourself. The fear has a negative, it doesn't work out story, embarrassing, something bad happening. And excitement is how good it's going to be and a positive story. But we are so trained to default into all the bad things that could happen because we don't train ourselves to think about all the good things that could happen. So from this point, in terms of creating your own life, and again, your podcast, all the people you've interviewed, I've seen some amazing guests on your show. What would be some of them? I'm sure this is in your upcoming book, but what would be some of the tips or tools that you would tell people in order to move from passive observer to the creator of your own life?
Well, I think first, when you're looking at like adversity, I think would go after more things that make you uncomfortable and make the mindset shift, first of all, of like, what can I get out of that? Like it may sound ridiculous, JJ, but so many of the successful things in life are actually just mindset shifts, like things you have to stop thinking about or ways you have to start looking at things differently. So I think how you look at adversity is really important. But at the same time, when I look at a lot of people I've spoken to, education and how people confront it is a big part of what makes you successful. As I mentioned, I have a master's degree that I don't use. I think a lot of advanced education really is BS at this point. This is even after having some myself. I've seen from a lot of people that, are people creating their own life. They are people that are extraordinary. They take responsibility for their own education and what they're learning. So take responsibility for what you're going to learn. And that means, it could be seeking out the right information, the right course, whatever it is. But at the same time, there's a really big thing missing in society that we had a lot in the Middle Ages. And this is this idea of apprenticeships. You kind of still see it in the trades, right? Like if you want to be a plumber, you work under a plumber for a bit or whatever it may be. But in the Middle Ages, like if you wanted to be an artist, if you want to be anything, you apprenticed. So I'm a big believer in finding somebody that is doing what you want to do and maybe working for them for a year for a little or no pay or whatever it is, because that serves two different purposes. Number one is discernment. Like, do I really want to do this? And number two, like, this is how I actually get the skill set to do it. So to me, I would look at like, where can I apprentice myself and learn from somebody that really is really doing what I want to do, so I can learn, do I want to do it? Number one. And number two, like, how do I get really good at it? So I'm a big believer in how you handle that is another part of it. Another really, really important thing is we've talked a lot about like what you want out of life and what others want for you out of life. I think that's a big viewpoint shift that has to happen. And because so many of us approach this in the way of, well, you want this for me out of life and I want this for me out of life. So, I'll show you. And here's the problem that happens. You create a lot of, negative energy headed towards yourself when you do that, right? People that want to stop you, want to slow you down. And when you look at it, like, people tend to look at that and be like, oh my gosh, how these people are reacting to me. Well, you created that reaction. So what you have to do is, and this is easier said than done, frankly, is figure out how you can take a look at this and say, hey, I understand your viewpoint, where you're coming from and why you want this for me. I don't want that for me. I want this. I'm going to work on this. And, we can continue to kind of have a relationship where we don't discuss that thing, or we discuss it differently, whatever it may be. But you have to figure out how that works for you, how you can let someone know that their goal for you is not your goal for you, but don't make it a headbutting thing, because a lot of people tend to do it. And a lot of people tend to create enemies and more adversity than you need because of how you approach it. And you created that situation. Another really important thing I think as well is developing your own leadership potential. I've talked to former CIA Director David Petraeus about this. And one of the things that he had said that he talked about when he was kind of a new officer, one of the things he learned was his first officer he worked under was really good at realizing how each person needed to be communicated differently and led differently. Because I think so often we think, well, this is how I do things, this is how everybody's going to do things, and you don't make friends that way. So he learned how to talk to each person rather than saying, look at how many medals are on my chest and this is why you should follow me. So when you can do that and really kind of develop yourself as a leader, and journaling is another big part to that, write out your thoughts on a daily basis to figure out, does this make sense? Doesn't it make sense? Where am I headed? What am I doing? But you have to really, it sounds crazy, but so much of it is what you think and how you approach things, if that makes sense.
Oh, none of it sounds crazy. I have a tool for all of it. You're like, this is easier said than done. I'm like, yeah, and I can teach you how to do it, because one of the things I use in all the work I do is the 3 steps to effective communication. And we're looking at the bottom of every argument is a need. And most negative feelings only happen when someone has a need not being met. But most people don't have a language of needs and are unaware of their feelings. They assume everybody thinks the same or interprets the same. We take all that off of the table, because most people are arguing about something that they're interpreting differently, that's hitting them in a place that they have different needs. And if you can at least come to the table understanding what your needs are, and you can listen for what their real needs are. And my guess is, for anyone who's living a life, I mean, there's several things it could be, right? It could be that you want approval. You're prostituting yourself for love so that your family will always love you. The parents might want your security and safety, and they don't want you to fail, and they're trying to protect you, and because they don't want to be cleaning up your mess later. So there's many, right? Like, we're not having, like, even the abortion conversation, like COVID, the abortion conversation, whatever. Take any major conversation, and we're talking about 2 different things. And I know you and I are probably more in alignment with COVID things, but let's just, put it out there for the people that are freaking out. They're afraid of their life, of dying. They're afraid of dying.
Yeah.
And on the other side, they're afraid of dying, right? Like, if we boil it all down, but it's just the how. It's, oh, you're going to protect me. Oh, whatever, you're going to kill me. It's all really the perspective.
It's a very, very simple thing, though. For a lot of people, it's the inability to take the viewpoint of the other, right? Like, it doesn't mean you have to agree with that viewpoint. It doesn't mean you have to justify that viewpoint, but you have to be able to see that viewpoint. And when you can see the viewpoint somebody's coming at something from, you can actually have I don't want to say better argument, but a better, more constructive conversation, if that makes sense. You can invalidate people less, right? Because if you invalidate somebody, they automatically don't have as much affinity for you and they don't want to talk to you as much. So if you can learn how to take the viewpoint of another, it is such a simple thing, but is a very difficult thing for a lot of people to do, because they can't take the I'm right, I'm wrong, whatever it may be out of it. Take that out of it and just look at, how does this person view this situation and how can you see that?
You had said earlier that you're not a life coach, and your wife says you're not very empathetic. And I know that you're a Taurus, and funny enough, that is actually quite a Taurus trait to, especially on a right and a wrong. Tauruses see things that are either right and wrong. Not all the time, and I don't know what your moon is or what your sun is. There's a lot of different variables in this, but Tauruses generally will get real hooked on if there's a right, then everybody else is wrong. And how dare you not see this? So
it was like that in my 20s. In my 30s, I'm not like that.
Right. Well, everything we've been talking about is that you exploring how someone else, you can't be a successful podcaster without asking someone or recognizing that you may have different viewpoints or interpretations, and being curious is to me one of the most important things in life, because it keeps you alive, it keeps you active, it keeps you growing, to just ask questions like why. And as a former trainer and actress, and and which I never thought all those things went together, and now I'm like, oh my God, everyone needs to take an acting class, because until you put yourself in someone else's shoes, where you have to literally embody an entire person's energy and viewpoint and belief system that is different than yours, most people will never do it because they have no skill set on how to do it. But it will make for, and I got tools for that too, but that will make for the best relationships when you can stop thinking and assuming that everybody sees things that you see the same way and is going to react emotionally the same way. They don't.
Traveling was actually remarkably good for that. Like I think I'm like somewhere in like 20 to 30 countries that I've been in. And I don't know, like as an American, I think a lot of times we tend to like, things are pretty good here. We're pretty happy with our situation, but I think we tend to think we're right about everything. And we have all these different stories, but different countries and things like that. And once you go to a different country and get their viewpoint, you're like, wait, this isn't what I was told it was. So to me, like going different places has helped me to understand viewpoints better, because I've kind of been forced to, if that makes sense.
No, it's perfect. It's beautiful. It's why I also think everyone should travel, because until you get out of your box, you don't know there's a bigger box, and you don't ask questions, and you don't, I know a lot of people who project on their emotions onto others, like third world countries, or, oh, they don't have it as good as we have it. They're actually happier. And because they don't have all the crap we deal with, and you can say shit on the show, by the way, but,
and their food's usually better, by the way, because they don't have as much Monsanto and all that BS.
Right. But Americans will assume because somebody doesn't have a Kmart or a Walmart or a Target or a whatever, and they can't get things delivered, that they somehow are suffering. And it's that sort of arrogant viewpoint, because you don't know how to, and most people are obviously also, tongue tied there, not aware of their lack of happiness. They think it's about stuff. They're so caught in the momentum of media, of news, of fear-based stuff, of technology. We're so addicted to being led in this fear-based momentum that nobody even stops for a second to say, do I even like this? Is this what I want? We become victims of it, but it's not because we're victims. It's because nobody's paying attention or even conscious of that. So I love all the things that you've mentioned. And I definitely, everyone travel, take an acting class. What would be like one or two more things that you have learned and that you have done that you think is really important for people to do, even if they're like small things, to start getting out of the passive sort of passive person into creating your own life consciously?
Well, I think, and this is another viewpoint thing, and this is the single hardest thing to learn, but it's more of a trait you need to have as an entrepreneur. If you look at a lot of good entrepreneurs, they can look 6 months ago, 6 months from now, 6 years from now. Too often, we're stuck in what's happened to us, right? Like you have to be able to, I don't know that saying being in the endless present is a good thing. That's kind of like 1984-ish, but like at the same time, it's being able to look at the different viewpoints of what you've experienced, say, okay, what can I get out of this and where can I go from this? But at the same time, look at, okay, so what effect will this cause, right? Like based on what I'm going to do, what effect will this cause 6 months from now, 6 years from now? Because a lot of times, especially when you're building a business, people say, okay, I'm going to make this decision now because it's going to make me $300. But if you give up that $300 now, that could be $300,000 a year from now. So whatever, you have to learn to kind of, I guess, temper yourself in a lot of ways and see different permutations of what can happen or what will happen at the same time. So I call it having entrepreneur vision 6 months from now, 6 years from now, and 6 years ago. Like you got to be able to see all those things at once, and it is difficult. But if you can get good at that, you'll make better decisions, not fear-based decisions. Because when you make fear-based decisions, you're going to do a lot of things wrong, and you're not going to be very happy with where you go. another really big thing that I would say as well is realizing that so much of what we do now in life is responsible for the stories we tell and who hears them. And I think you have to understand that you have a responsibility to tell your own story and get it out there. Like, it's the media is a 24-hour cycle, and they're looking for whatever, something in your house could kill you at 10, like there's always something that they're looking to scare you with. So they're not looking for the good things people are doing. So you have to realize, if you have a big mission, if you have a big purpose, if you have something you want to do, you have to be the one that's going to tell every single person about it. And, that could be a new business. It could be a new idea. It could be something you're trying to forward, but you have to realize that you have to take full responsibility for that. And it's interesting because I look at the thread that goes through all this stuff. It's, what are you willing to take responsibility for? And a lot of times people think responsibility ends at a certain point, and then there's these things that just happen. Well, sure, there's things in life that happen. There's bad weather, there's all these different things, but did you plan for that? What did you do about that? There's always a responsibility level in everything in your life. And sometimes it really sucks. And trust me, I've been through some shit. I've seen some shit. But like, if you're willing to say, what can I be responsible for? Not always making yourself wrong, but what can I be responsible for to change my situation? There's so many of these things will go differently for you.
Speaking my language. Yeah, I tell people to, even if you don't think you're responsible for it, you have two choices. You can be a victim and you're not responsible for anything. And in that position, you will never be happy because you'll always feel victimized. You'll feel powerless.
And you can't change anything.
And you can't change anything. Right. If you go to the other extreme, and I literally mean extreme, where you take responsibility for everything in your experience, even if it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Then you start to look at, what can I do about it? And how did I attract it? How am I tuned into it if I'm aware of it? You can't, because we can't blame circumstances and people. You can, you can't change them. Like, good luck with that. Good luck with trying to change circumstances and people to make you happy. It's not going to last. So
because you have to look at what that does to you. I heard an interview with former NFL quarterback for the Colts. I forget his name, but anyway, he in order to be like a really good player, he did these weird things. Like, when they went out to dinner, he'd order food for everybody at the table because he wanted to make sure, like, okay, if everybody has this food, they're all going to be happy. So he was trying to like make decisions for every single person in his life, and he was miserable because he was taking too much responsibility. So it's figuring out, where does your willingness end and where does the willingness of another begin? Like, that's really, really important as well.
That is a great point. So I want to make sure that people, because I know that a lot of my audience, especially any of the men that are out there, but also the women, because I have that kind of, people are curious. They would not be listening to me if they weren't. They wouldn't be around this long if they weren't. They, either like me or don't like me. One of the two extremes is sort of no in between, and to feel the passion, and and you have it too, in terms of the looking at life, taking sort of control as best you can with a positive attitude and with belief and in yourself and others, and hope, and moving forward, and tools, and all the things that we talk about on the show. I want people to know about your podcast, Create Your Own Life podcast. What is your schedule like? Is it a weekly show? Is it more than once a week?
So it's Tuesday and Thursday, and we're looking at making some changes in the new year because I am looking to start getting some live streaming with it. A lot of the interviews are still going to be pre-recorded, but we're looking to move to a 5-day-a-week live stream show. I don't know what that looks like yet, but we've been talking about it with the production team, and we've got some exciting stuff in store. So right now it's Tuesday and Thursday, 2 days a week.
Perfect. And then do you want to share with others some of the other things that you have to offer in case they're interested?
Well, it depends. We do like to talk about some really controversial issues on the show as well, because I think, like, when you look at creating your own life, I think life itself is a game board. And if you don't know all the, freedoms, barriers, and goals around that game board, you're going to be affected of a lot of things in your life. So what we try to do is we approach, we talk to business people, we talk about some important political issues, a lot of things you need to know. So at least you're aware of them, and, you can feel more positive in your life. So we talk about a lot of things that I think, in order to play the game of life well, you need to know.
What about you have a PR agency. So for anyone who's listening that is a podcaster, or do you do it for people that have books?
So we work with a lot of authors, but we CEOs and founders with really big missions are our main public we like to work with. And it's from the perspective of, we look for people that are trying to better the environment around them. Like, this is about more than just making money. It's about the impact you're leaving behind. It's about what you're creating. It's about who you're helping. So if you're somebody with a really big mission that really wants to, change this planet in a positive way, our company is called Command Your Brand. And we deal specifically with podcasts and helping people get on the right ones and helping podcasters find great guests. So we're over at commandyourbrand.com.
Excellent. All right. All these links will be in the show notes. If you're on the podcast, if you're on YouTube, it'll be underneath this video. Jeremy, this was awesome. This is fun. I love talking to podcasters. I don't get to do it that often. I mean, a couple here or there. Lou's been on the show a couple times. Of course, Doug is on the show, not as often as I might like him to be, but it's great to talk to somebody with the same curiosity and passion for good conversation and learning.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today.